The UDR Cast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDR Cast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDR Cast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the UDR Cast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at billward.life and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time. Okay, here we go again. This time we're going to change it up a bit. We got our buddy Matt R., who's coming up on 1 year next week. So he's coming up on his 1 year. So we got Jesse P. and myself, and we're just going to do a little bit of round table, shoot the shit, and kind of see what comes out of it. Coming up on a year here. Why don't you kick us off and see where it goes?
Thanks, Bill. So yeah, I think trying to get some information out there, maybe for people that are around the area that I'm at, some people maybe a little bit earlier that are looking to start to level up. I think the big thing for me was recognizing that there was some strong stagnancy growing really, really quickly, and in and around my 6 to 9 months. And the two decisions that I figured that I had was to really dig into this and learn a little bit more, or it wasn't going to last much longer. So in that time, I spent a lot of time trying to dig into, the 6, the 7, the 10, try and really understand what the 3 meant to me. So I think something that gets overlooked a lot, and that something that I hear in meetings a lot, is there's really not a strong message being carried about the 6 and 7. And because it's such a short portion of the book, there's a lot of overlooking going into it. And through the experience that I've learned in the last little while is the importance of 6 and 7 and trying to dig into it on a deeper level. Do you guys have anything to put in about kind of the process that you went through early on in recovery that brought you to the understanding you're at now with this step?
What the fuck are we talking about?
Misunderstanding around 6 and 7, a lot of the times you go to a meeting, you hear somebody share right off the wall. You have a pretty good idea just from that there's going to be a whole bunch of fucking nonsense in that share. The idea of misunderstanding is throughout the whole program of Alcoholics Anonymous and a lot of its literature. So for there to be a misunderstanding of 6 and 7 isn't, shocking. It isn't shocking because in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's not much information given. And the 12 by 12 isn't really brought in. There's a couple of meetings where there's 12 by 12 discussions. I know some guys, early recovery for myself, that, the 12 by 12 was brought into certain things that we did, but, really wasn't emphasized as being, one of the definite passage or doorways through 6 and 7, and just getting some practical information around those steps. So going through that information, early recovery helped. As we chatted before, the 6 is very theoretical. The 6 is like a pre-education, whereas opposed to the 1, I'm given the information on a whole wealth of experience that I should have on the topic, in some cases, a number of decades. But in regards to the defective character has always been in the shadow of other addictions, alcohol, drugs, these types of things. So when I'm presented the information on the defective character, it's a pre-education. In many instances, the man that I'm working with has absolutely no fucking idea what I'm talking about. He might be able to make some connections, but even then those connections is more of the theoretical. It's not tangible that, yes, I've been there, that's happened, yada, yada, right? So you're giving him a pre-education, and then from that pre-education, he's going out in the world to burn his hand. So it was only when I was out in the world burning my hand that I was able to even come close to an understanding of self, an understanding of the real problem here that presides. If you notice, if you listen to me and Bill talk, very rarely will you hear us talk about substances or drugs, gambling, whatever. And that's because this whole time we're chatting about the deep root causes and conditions, right? And so, when we chat about the 6 and 7, where the conviction follows, where the conviction comes from, is that this is the deep-rooted cause and conditions. This is the real problem. A lot of people are under the impression that they come to the program, they get rid of the substance, now they're out of the woods. The substance is gone. Now this one good time character I once had will come back. All will be good. I will be happy. But, now they're confronted with what caused the drinking, what caused the need for release of these substances in the first place. They essentially get rid of what you have medicated the real problem with, which is self, an extension of this defective character. They've got rid of the medication. They have no way to medicate that. And now these things are run rampant, probably more than they've ever been in their life. I mean, the self and the defective character is a compensation for the release that was medicating it, if that makes any sense at all. So what happens is now is that, maybe when their defective character they were using, they were operating at a 10, let's say a 3 or 4. Maybe in some cases, some areas, the finances 6 or 7. Maybe with the women, maybe even still crazy 8 or 9. But it's masked by alcohol. There's some sort of relief given. When you take away that medication, you take away that relief. Now, generally as a whole, they could be operating on all areas of their life with a defective character at a solid 6 or 7. With the women, could be an easy 10. With the finances, could be an easy 10, right? So from that, it's only a matter of time before they meet at the crossroads where they recognize what's happening here. They're taking advantage of the information and experience that they've been given, or they will surely drink again.
And what you're saying is they get drunk on these things. They are now drunk on lust and women and relationship hopping. And that is, you put the drink and the drug down and you shelf that. This disease still wants out. And it's going to get out through, whatever means possible. Wherever your weakest link is. And most guys' weakest link is the sex relation, right? Most human beings actually put the drink and the drug down. Now the disease still wants out. And primarily it'll come out through sex relation. And if it doesn't come out through sex relation, another physical form is through money, through career and finance, through gambling. And we actually, in a sense, we get drunk in these areas. And if we stay drunk in these areas, we will pick up a drink again because we're living in the restless, irritable discontentedness. We are living in the flaws of our makeup that caused our problems. We are living in self that manifests itself in various ways is what defeats us. And it's very similar to the alcohol and the drugs. The alcohol and the drugs used to work to medicate the spiritual malady to whatever degree. But like it says in the big book in Bill's story, forging the weapon that would one day turn in its flight and cut us to ribbons. This shit will turn in its flight and cut you to ribbons, the alcohol and the drugs. And then we need help. That's why we're here. So it's very similar with the defects of character. As we use that for our substance, essentially, in life, it actually helped us expand our life. So lust and manipulation and a lot, and anger and a lot of these defects of character and the underneath layers of it actually helped expand our lives to many degrees of our life. But eventually, as you stay sober and you get older, these defects don't actually work anymore. So what once worked, just like the alcohol, they start slowly turning in their flight and start cutting you to ribbons. And once they cut you to ribbons too much, you need fucking relief, and you need it now. And it's either a rope on your neck or a gun in your hand or a fucking drink in your hand or a crack pipe in your mouth. And then it's a vicious cycle, which is why in the big book, it talks about an entire psychic change. I find a lot of guys can come in here and they don't work on the entire psychic change. They have like little blurps of spiritual awakenings that really light them up and get them kind of moving in the right direction, but they haven't had an entire psychic change. Let's say an entire psychic change is 0 to 100%. Well, they might have had a 20% psychic change or a 40% psychic change. But even at 40%, half measures avail us nothing. 60% half measures, barely over half measures, are still going to avail us nothing. The entire psychic change is the fucking key component to this. Whereas I think a lot of people, the ego can misconstrue a lot of the changes as a psychic change fully, but really it's only a small percentage of the psychic change. And then they actually go back and revert back to these behaviors, and then eventually they revert back to the substance, because you can't live in the problem. And the problem isn't the drugs and alcohol. That's always the solution, right? The real problem, like the book says, is that selfish self-centeredness. And it arises out of ourselves. And a lot of that's deep-rooted. And the deep-rooted shit doesn't fucking get dealt with unless you're working a solid program. Over the years and the time that you put in, the rooted issues will come up. But if you're not keeping your own house in order and working a solid program as the real deal alcoholic, and if you're not able to deal with this with a clean house, working all the steps in your life, sponsorship, using pillars, fucking inventories, prayer, meditation, if you're not able to deal with what's coming up, the shit will deal with you. And then you get restless, irritable, discontented again. And then, people with 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, they're fucked. So does that help?
Yeah, I think that it does. So where I was at when I went through this without the firm understanding of I really knew fuck all, right? And, when you come into step 12 and it says having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, I find that, like you said, like ego can step in and make you think that all this has happened. But I think without a firm understanding of what we're actually doing in this program, it's hard to find that spiritual awakening, like a true spiritual awakening. And for a couple of months, it felt like, sure, maybe it had kicked in. It went from, for me, being no God to what I thought was all God, but really it was all self, right? And until, the importance of really working some of these steps in the way that they are laid out, the problem for me in early recovery, and again, I don't like speaking for anybody or everybody in particular, but this literature can be digested in so many different ways. We spoke recently about, over time, and as you continue to level up in this process and get some more time under your belt, you can look at this literature in so many different ways. So when you first come in, if this isn't kind of like driven down your throat by your sponsor that, that maybe doesn't see the importance of the 6 and 7, and to show a working practice of a solid step 10, and, break away from things that are out of program that have been adapted into the program, using a cellular app to track your written inventories and not really understanding what the fuck you're doing to begin with. I think it just creates foundation for failure, essentially. Jesse said that, it's a going out and burning your hands process. We have to learn by failure in almost any aspect of life. But in what we're dealing with here, I think we might not have that time, right? So if you start this program off on the wrong footing and you don't have this established or at least the understanding and the willingness to maybe dig into it a little bit further in your first set of steps. I think kind of what I'm bringing this back into here is now, with the understanding that you guys have on the literature and your importance of driving home the importance of some of this work, that is implemented fully into your sponsorship style now. But I'd like to kind of hear about what it was like when you had started. You know, it was very much impressed upon me that go the fuck out and sponsor guys right when I was done my 12 steps. You know, I didn't think I had anything to offer, and it, you know, trying to break out of self there was one of the bigger periods of growth in my early recovery. But I definitely don't think that, you know, even now I don't have the understanding that something like somebody like you guys could bring to the table as far as really digging into the literature. So what was it like in early sponsorship, and how has the message changed, and how did you handle these situations in early sponsorship where maybe you couldn't have drove this home the way that you can now?
And maybe in our own experience, right? So, you know, going way back into the beginning, I didn't have a clue of fucking really what the program was. I just knew that I needed to be sober. And like Jesse said, my good character would one day return and everything would be just fine and dandy. Well, that wasn't the case, because like I explained earlier, after a little while of that grace of God sobriety, and I had done the steps too, but the defective character started fucking really ramping itself up, and it started causing me and other people a lot of pain. The cool thing with me is I didn't want to cause anyone pain anymore. And I didn't want to drink or do drugs. And I had, you know, 20 or 30% psychic change. And I was really liking that. This is all in retrospect, mind you. But as I kind of continued on, you know, burning my hand over and over and over became fucking mainstay. Another cool thing was I was sponsoring, though, all this time. As I would tell somebody or point out some serious character flaws in them, I was looking at myself. And I'm like, okay, I'm telling this guy to do this and to be careful of this because it's not good character. And I'm fucking over here doing the same fucking thing. And that didn't sit well within me trying to work this program. It actually caused some guilt and shame, which was actually a positive motivator. So it allowed me to slowly, over the time I kept working with guys, to change, and I kept burning my hand. I wanted to change. And then, you know, there was actually a turning point when I really burnt my hand, and Jesse was like right there with me. And we said, dude, let's fucking go. And he was burning his hand too. You know, we were both doing it. But then we just said, you know what? We know the solution is in this literature. Let's look for it. So then we dove into the literature and we started looking for it, and we found it. Jesse had mentioned as we inspected step 6. It's kind of general, but it's very important at the time where we needed it. And at the time it wasn't general, but over the years of actually understanding self, looking back, it's very general. And the step 4 and the 12 and 12 goes more into some of the subtle nature of what the 6 is talking about. But it was only through the pain, man, and through the sponsorship. And then watching other guys burn their hand on the exact same things that we were burning our hands on. And also watching these guys burn their hands on things that I wasn't burning my hands on. And gaining, like step 10 talks about, our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. I was growing in understanding and effectiveness, not only with them and their experiences and collecting that knowledge and data. I was gaining my own knowledge and experience. And in the step 6, it really said I need God to help me remove these things. So that's, I think, the biggest emphasis of what we're talking about for me in the 6. Any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without reservation has indeed come a long way spiritually. And when I first read that line, it didn't sink into me when I read that. It wasn't until I fucking started practicing, trying to bring Creator into these areas, talking with God-centered 12-step people about my problems and being redirected to God, that these things started to be released from me. So it was like a year or two later where that line punched me in the face. And I'm like, that's what's happening. That's what's happened. And today it's one of my favorite lines still, because that's what continually happens. If I'm practicing this shit with enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly over and over and over and over. Step 6, willingness to relinquish these things with God on all my faults, all of them, not just some of them, without reservation, without fucking thinking about it. We just do it. Then I come a long way spiritual. I start going closer and becoming closer to God. And because this step 6, to me, it's step 6 mostly over step 7, it changed me so much is why I started hammering this shit into the rooms, why I didn't stop talking about it. And it's only through sponsorship of many hundreds of men where that's really fucking strengthened. And like we talk about the mega mind, 2 minds together, Jesse's experience, my experience together, living separate lives in recovery, coming together with the data going, fuck. It's pretty fucking apparent that this is the fucking issue. And then we're both passionate of how this program changed us on the inside. We want it to change other people on the inside. So when we go to the meetings, we're talking from passion and heart. And that is actually what connects with other people, because you can listen to people with ego and lots of times the mind just shuts off and you're not really listening anymore. But when somebody talks with passion and conviction and heart, it opens your heart. So people are listening to that message and it fucking ripples in the program. So I think it's important to understand that. It doesn't really become apparent in the first maybe 6 months of recovery. It comes apparent later, after 6 months, after 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, understanding self and the depth of self and how cunning it is and how it wants to run the show. It becomes very acute. And then understanding the acuteness of it, like Jesse said earlier, you don't hear us talk about drugs and alcohol. The substance is actually self, right? The substance is the defects of character, but under defects of character is the instincts and self. And that's essentially what the substance is for us today. Jess, you got a take on any of that bullshit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I look at my recovery as a whole in the literature and sponsoring guys, I've gone through many, many different themes. So quite, commonly you start sponsoring your first number of guys, let's say your first 10, 20 guys. I mean, if you're lucky, you might get maybe 2 to 4 of them past step 4, right into a 5. So naturally you're going to be stuck in 1, 2, 3, and 4 for potentially a year, if not a little bit more, depending on how much you're getting out there, how many guys you're grabbing. So I don't even know if Bill mentioned this, and in all the times you've chatted about, I haven't heard him talk about it, but what we did to compensate for that, because I knew that he was getting guys into the latter steps. I wasn't at this point. And so what we did is when we did all this growth in the 12 and 12, I would call it reaffirming. I would reaffirm guys' steps through the 12 and 12. So we would take guys that are already 12 step, maybe they're struggling a little bit, blah, blah, blah. Then we would take them through 6 and 7 in the 12 and 12. We would take them through 10, 11 through the 12 and 12 and kind of reaffirm that with the big book and the 12 and 12. So I was able to bridge the gap of me being able to take these guys through a full set of steps. So I did that there. Like I said, these themes though, so throughout that time of going through just the first 4 steps, with Bill being there, we were bouncing ideas off, like something would be unlocked for me. I would see something in a totally different light, or I would get an intuitive thought to go a different way than what I would normally do. I would bounce that off of him. Then it would actually become a theme in my sharing. And through those themes, I've gotten many different sponsees just on different themes, right? Like an example, maybe about a year or 2 ago, I had a lot of like an influx of guys, because this is kind of how it'll work is like, I could sponsor maybe 10 guys. 4 of those 10 are going to be on step 4, maybe a couple of them are on step 1, a couple of them are in the amends process. But anyways, through this one cycle, I had a fucking influx of guys on 9. And I'd spent like a lot of time in the step 9. And throughout that, there was a lot of things designed for living things. Like at first, a lot of the themes had to go with, how does it apply to the step itself, practical application. Once that blueprint was pretty well understood, there wasn't much more growth that could be found in understanding the blueprint of how I could practically use it in my life and how I could practically teach it. Once that's over, it's all designed for living. So the last number of years, I'd probably say the last 3 years of my recovery, everything that's been illuminated to me has been from a design for living standpoint. This is how I could take a guy through the book twice, both sessions being totally different information. So how has sponsorship changed? I mean, it's fucking changed from literally night and day. It's changed from me taking a man through a book, fucking shaking, not knowing what I'm going to do, for me being, pretty confident, pretty understanding of what he says, that the book can combat that. Understanding his temperament, I can understand how to take him through the book actually with a good amount of ease. For the most part, in fives, there's nothing new that I've heard, except in the sex conduct. I mean, the sex conduct will always pose some new and interesting things depending on the man. Other than that, the growth still happens, but now the growth is a little bit more, how do I help these guys in life and society? That is the growth in my own life today, the biggest growth, and where I'm putting a good amount of my effort. And in turn, I'm able to, give that growth, give that experience to new guys and how to set them up in life itself. Right? So that'd be pretty well the trajectory of growth, having to do with the themes. And then of course, where I am in my recovery, being able to, experience that and give that back to a guy that I'm working with.
I think, a common theme based out of your experience here is it's still a burning of the hand process. If you're not doing it, you're not learning, right? And there's still some strong importance there in early sponsorship because you're not going to get to that level without doing it to begin with. Can you recall offhand how many guys you figure you sponsored in that first year?
I probably sponsored in my first year of recovery was, I'd say at best 20 guys, at best, realistically, probably more like 10, 15. And then from there, I probably tripled the numbers from the first year to the second year. So you got to remember, I was still doing the steps. Like it took me probably around 6 to 9 months to do the steps, give or take. So let's say 7. And then out of that year, I had maybe another 5 months. And in that time, probably 15 guys. And to be honest with you, much experience that came out of that really wasn't too much. I was still fucking dazed myself anyways. You know what I mean? And I had a very lackluster grasp on just the basic directions found in the book. I mean, it was only until experiences that happened in my second year that unlocked the book. I was able to see it no longer in black and white. And that's really where the change happened for me, for other things unlocking. When I understood that this was a working textbook of life, much like a Haynes manual would be to repair a car step by step, this book was a step-by-step how to recover from the substance, also emotionally, also spiritually. Once I understood that, and that came from a mix of experience of fucking around and doing the exact opposite things that I should have been doing. But that also came from the 12 and 12 too, because the 12 and 12, as me and Bill read it, a lot of that unlocked. And I believed it as word. Right? When you think the book is a theory or some guy's opinion, good fucking luck. I feel sorry for you. But when you know the book is word, when you know this is the book, this is the working document that is going to show you all you need to know, that's where the change came. Once that change came, then I opened up to everything that I was reading. Everything I was reading, I took it literally, not as a theory, not as a suggestion. That's the big thing, the suggestions. This program is suggestive to the members of the family of the alcoholic, to the kids of the alcoholic, to the employer, potentially the medical fraternity. It is not suggestive to the real deal alcoholic that the book describes. I'd say that's where a lot of things fucking change. That's where, I was able to take a lot of experiences and actually turn them into something that was tangible. Right. So Bill will talk about, like you don't make mistakes, and that's true up to a certain degree. So let's say in my life, I make a financial mistake and I don't learn from it. then I make it again. The first time was a mistake because I didn't capitalize on it, right? If I capitalize on my mistakes the first time I make them, that's called an education. They call that being thrown in the fire, right? But if I'm consistently making mistakes of the same variety, let's say in regards to women or relationships, then I'm actually on my way to a drink. Because the dishonesty and the justification that brought me to that mistake a third, fourth fucking time, it's only a matter of time because I'm breeding the fire of the dishonesty that takes for me to have a drink. Although I think it's on a low level, a lot of the principles of me drinking is very similar to how I treat women. It's very similar to how I treat gambling, drugs, alcohol, pomp, pride, money. All of it's the same. When I get involved, the dishonesty's involved. That's it. That's a period statement.
Yeah, it's pretty much like I was talking with you yesterday. We talked about a situation where this gentleman was, being dishonest, or maybe it was two gentlemen actually, not telling the whole truth. Maybe it wasn't an outright lie, but they weren't telling the whole truth, and these guys are new in recovery. And I said, yeah, well, the alcoholic will rationalize and justify the most errant bullshit to suit their actions or their inaction. And that's just part of the nature. That's part of the illness. Remember, these are very sick men. And that's just part of the fucking deal. And when we talked earlier about guys fucking around with their time, fucking around with our fucking everything, everything. That's part of it. And that's part of the learning and growing and setting the boundaries as you grow at 20 guys in. Right. And then dealing with these guys consistently over years and years, you fucking start seeing, we end up knowing them better than they know themselves. We really do. And like, I don't know how many times I've said it. And sometimes I'm like fucking very into the conversation because the self-delusion that they're fucking living in is so fucking thick. I will just say, I fucking know you better than you know you. Trust me. And what gives me that leverage is the numbers of men that I've sponsored, is the character of which, I walk with, is the passion and the message that comes out of my mouth, and is basically a lot of it's based in the reputation, right? And what they perceive, like you said earlier, what they perceive who I am. It holds a lot of depth and weight. Right. And so me saying something like that to somebody, typically they would be like, fuck you, you pompous motherfucker. But they don't take that approach with me. And I don't even care if they did. If they hung up on me, which has happened, it's almost like it doesn't fucking faze me, dude. It doesn't bother me. Why? Because they are very sick people. Yeah. And when you worked with hundreds and hundreds of them, it's fucking pretty plain to see. What I want to actually kind of flip this to is, we talk a lot about the alcoholic and addict, but this is a human nature thing. A lot of what we've learned through the sponsorship of these men isn't just, okay, we're very fluent in identifying and observing alcoholics and addicts. Yes, we are, but we've become very fluent in the nature of a human being. We've become very fluent in the nature of human desire for sex, relation, emotional, material security, companionship, deep-rooted fears, subtle behaviors, mind and emotional manipulation. Because the book talks about, yeah, we're the most extreme example of self-will run riot, but we're not the only example. And there's a lot of people out there that are extreme examples of it too. Their drug is just money, or womenizing, or fucking relationship hopping, or fuck, there's lots of people out there. So this becomes a very important tool, not just for fucking alcoholics, addicts, for fucking life in general and people in general. And it just fucking, it's an amazing way to get there. And I'll finish with this, and I think I might be off Matt's topic a little bit, but there isn't a better way in the world to fucking navigate a design for living, in my opinion, than the foundation of what's in that book. Whether you're an alcoholic or not, there's no better foundation to fucking start a different way of life than what's in that book. And if you live with the foundation of this, you can bring in any other spiritual method that you want, and it will enhance everything. So, I firmly believe that to be a fundamental truth.
Okay, I want to speak to that if I can. So, is it true that a lot of the stuff that we talk about is a part of the human experience? Yes, it is. Fear. Fear, and we have had many discussions over this, fear above else. Like, I'm not talking about a fear of spiders. That's not what we talk about here. We talk about selfish, self-centered fear. We talk about deep-rooted fear. We talk about handicapping fear. We're talking about the fear that, essentially keeps you from being your true self. So you take that, many people, just out of being humans, have a unhealthy amount of fear. Then you tack on resentments. Then you tack on, guilt and shame from a sex conduct. All these things bring about remorse. All these missed opportunities because of fear bring about remorse. Essentially, also too, all these missed opportunities potentially in the sex conduct bring about, fear and remorse. All these situations that went south, in the resentments, relationships dead, these types of things. And I'm not even describing the alcoholic. I am just describing a natural human being. You tack on, shame, you tack on the guilt. Sure, you also tack on this restless, irritable discontent, which for the alcoholic is all three and full blown. For your average human being, it could be one or the other, but it comes in spurts. So you tack on the world that I just brought on, that I just talked about, then you tack on the spurts of restless, irritable discontent, and you got, quite the situation. But what I want to pose, though, is that for the alcoholic, whose very life depends upon this program and a spiritual awakening that is found in the latter half of this program, even that individual can find it difficult to subject himself to the simple program laid out at his feet. So, and that's given a sufficient bottom. That's given this guy's burnt it all down to the ground, living at the mustard seed, destroyed his career. His kids are long gone, everything. That is what you think would bring about a bottom isn't necessarily so. So that's the problem posed with the individual, to where, a lot of the times they might hit a bottom or two in a lifetime, where an alcoholic has hit, sometimes tens of bottoms, and they're not sufficient enough, right? So if it's that difficult for a spiritual approach for an alcoholic whose life depends on it, in my experience, it can be that much more difficult for an individual who's just getting spurts of pain here and there and here and there. And maybe, like I said, maybe tops three emotional. Sometimes it's not even physical. For the alcoholic, it's all three. It's emotional, it's physical, and it's spiritual, right? For this individual, it might be three bottoms, all three, all different types rather, throughout a lifetime of, person lives to 90, let's say. It might be, in their 20s spiritual, might be in their 40s, might be physical, right? And then it may be in their 70s emotional, So those are the variations that make this whole process, for all these things to align. I call that God, for all these things to align, for this person to actually get it, can be very difficult for all those things to unalign for a wholesale basis. What makes the program of Alcoholics Anonymous a wholesale basis is the step one. That's how you could lay them out to a conversion experience, as did Dr. Silkworth and as did Carl Jung, right? So how do we lay it out for a normal individual who still seems to be getting by?
That was me, though. My lowest of bottoms was not when I came in now. I'd been in and out and around for 4 or 5 years and had bottoms substantially lower than where I was when I got here. With no understanding of the alcoholic cycle, I could see, not understand it, but I could see it in my life. Coming back in this time, it was a firm understanding that, like, no matter what I changed, people, places, things, environments, it never solved the problem. And there was no easier, softer way in my life. Sobriety didn't work. There was definitely no recovery. Sobriety made it worse. trying to alter the substances I was taking typically made it worse. I was trying to control my life through self. And it wasn't until I understood that it was a relinquishment of self to get me away from the problems that I thought were the problems to begin with. You know, I've lost a lot of people in my life that had had minor experiences with this program and with different fellowships. And there's a strong distaste in the people that I've lost that, you know, this was not for them. And without really digging into what this program really means and taking away the understanding that, like, it's not about the drugs and the alcohol, right? It's, if we aren't getting down to what makes us do it in the first place, then I think it's all for nothing, right? If you come in here with the sole intention of getting clean, which is what most of us come in with, and stay with that, I think it's you're destined for failure if you don't really try and understand what this literature really is. You know, me and Bill were speaking yesterday about, like, the levels of understanding in this text. And I like how you put it, you know, like, this has to be word, you know. And for me, I'm a very, you know, I get turned on by intellect pretty quickly. You know, it really gets the blood flowing. And to see how many different levels this book has, you know, it's hard for me to believe that a man wrote this, or this is an opinion. For me, it feels like this is channeled directly from God, is in any way that you want to look at this, because there's no way that, you know, this book, as old as it is still so relevant, if not more relevant now than ever. You know, the spiritual sickness and the pandemic that we're looking at with, you know, different forms of addiction and issues in life today, and the focus on mental health and trying to, you know, clarify what traumas and things mean today. This book is so deeply rooted in the way that we have been raised our entire lives pre-addiction. It shows the precursors for what make us what we were when we got here, right? But I think trying to kind of bring this back in, you know, for somebody that may be finding this early in recovery, where, you know, they're not quite sure if they're the real deal, right? And for me, you know, this book is not a suggestion. In the time that I've been around not using the program, fucking self-will run riot. My life was terrible. In the time in this program, not working the program, self-will run riot. My life is terrible. It's so far away from just dropping the substance and without trying to get into the root causes. So I think a good way to kind of segue into this is for somebody that may be struggling with the God concept, or thinking that it's a matter of just putting the drink or the drug down. What is one thing that you would say to somebody in this position that needs to hear something like this to really turn them over to the real understanding of what this book actually means?
I think what's happened over the years, this is my own opinion, my observation. What I think has happened over the years is the message has gotten so misconstrued, and the message in the rooms is so much about not the book, about just keep coming back, keep coming till the miracle happens. You know, the fellowship of tradition 3 is number 1. We can love you till you can love yourself. You know, just keep coming around, and this eventually will take on you. And like, when you really look at life and how a human being's designed, you know, if you give them an option to sit in a lawn chair and watch guys work, or pick up the shovel and fucking dig the hole, most people are going to fucking sit in a lawn chair and watch somebody else work, right? It's not until it's out of pure necessity that someone is driven to pick up the shovel and fucking dig. So part of the human nature, human condition, is to do what's easy. So in the rooms, as the message delivered is primarily an easier, softer way, and then you get a guy like me or a guy like Jesse or some other people in the rooms sharing a different message than what is the norm, it's like, why the fuck would I want to do that when everyone else is telling me to do this? And just come to meetings. Just say the step 3 prayer over and over, whatever it is. Why would somebody want to do what's fucking hard? They wouldn't, and they don't. So I think what do you say to somebody in this situation is you can't really say anything. I think it's the time and through burning your hand over the experiences. And the other thing is in the rooms, not everyone's a real deal alcoholic. And as you see, Jesse talked earlier about getting in tune with who to go talk to. You know, it's time to give the chips out. So the person gets up there and said, anyone taking 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 9 months? Some people are going to get up and this is a celebration for them. I got 6 months, I got 9 months, but they're not really even alcoholics. And they're fucking running and jumping. Meanwhile, the guy over here in the fucking corner who can't fucking pull his head above his eyes, who's fucking burning laser beams into the floor, who's shaking like a fucking leaf, he can't fucking get it because of that misconstrued message. But this other person who's not an alcoholic, who can just go to meetings and fucking they get lit up through the fellowship, they're taking the chips and this guy's over here getting the misconstrued message. But that's the guy intuitively that we're going to go fucking talk to because we can feel that. We know that. And that's who we go talk to. And I think the big thing is we stay consistent and persistent and you carry the real fucking message, which is a lonely fucking road. It's very lonely doing this, but the fellowship you crave will grow up about you. And it's the fellowship of the Spirit. It's the fellowship of God. It's the fellowship of service. It's the fellowship of altruism. It's the fellowship of spirituality. And that is the fellowship that grows up about you. And then it changes. And then the ripple effect, because it's built in love, God is love. So the fellowship of God is built in love. That fellowship will radiate itself. And then other people become almost infected with the God dope. And how can you not want to fucking give that feeling away? It comes now from a place of love and fucking passion versus, just keep coming. It'll stick when it sticks. And a lot of that's based in self and not willing to really fucking do much else to help somebody. Show up at a couple meetings, share my opinion. I'm going to go to the 3-step topic fucking meeting. I'm not going to the step and tradition meeting. I'm going to go to the 3-topic discussion meeting. Why? Because I get to share my fucking opinion, my selfishness. And I don't know the fucking steps anyway. So I'd rather just share my opinion and fucking, I got 10, 20 years in. People are going to respect me because I got the time. So that's kind of what I fucking see, dude. And so I think it's just important for the individual to carry the real message solidly, consistently, and pass it on solidly and consistency. And then it manifests from there. And all you can really do in this world is, be the change that you want to see.
I think that's spot on, very accurate. Obviously, I mean, like me and Bill have had, pretty long conversations about this, talking about it being a lonely road. That's correct. That was correct when me and him, because we were considered big book thumpers at a certain time. I actually haven't heard that said in a couple of years now. But, like when you do that, when you are considered that, I mean, it's all tact and common sense. Everything we've chatted about, with years of recovery, you're going to understand time and place, right? So there's a time and place to go full big book and recite it. And then there's a time and place, for example, like a Renfrew conversation, when guys are, right off the street type of shit, all of them, maybe, diving into, pretty deep level literature isn't going to have maximum benefit, right? There are people out there that want to see big book thumpers drink, right? That's an attitude and a sickness of self that is seen throughout these rooms. I could chat on this subject, I would probably say for a solid hour, easy. But what I'm going to do, I think that Bill covered all the bases. I'm going to sidestep that and I'm going to chat specifically to the newcomer. In regards to the first year for me was unbelievably painful, like it would be for just about any alcoholic addict who is getting away from the substance. Because what's happening is that you're going against the very grain of your nature. You're going against the very thing that's been so deep rooted for, in some cases, decades of your life. And without the substance, you're going to feel very exposed. You're going to feel very open. You don't really have anything to fall back on. Right now, you're in a position where, at least myself, I was running away from pain my whole life. I ran from pain as if it were a plague. And now I have to face all that. Like now I have to face the piper. I'm here, I gotta deal with everything almost head on. And, I remember going to a number of meetings in early recovery. I ended up finding a home group, and that cut some of the pain. And I ended up finding some people in that room that had what I want, not so much on a material basis, but a little bit more from like a spiritual, emotional stability standpoint. And it just seemed that if you had the spiritual component and you had the, emotional stability standpoint, then you seem to be successful in these other areas. Following what I just mentioned in the world of material, you drove a half decent vehicle. You seem to have some things together from those 2 points. So those people ended up cutting the pain. And then from there, I hadn't had a real life for years, like, anything to do with hobbies or, anything to do with any real life outside of bars, nightclubs, and street corners type shit. So, going out to eat with a group, going to Denny's is something that we did for a good while, going to, like, we would do, me and Bill would go to Friday night meetings. We'd hit the, and this is an early recovery. This is probably second, third year, but we'd hit 3 meetings in one night. And so you start collecting, so Fridays I go to 3 meetings in one night, Tuesday we go to Denny's, and you start kind of building, on a small scale, a little bit of a life. You start getting a little bit of human connection. And some of those things, at least a good amount of those things for me, really cut a lot of this pain of being alone. A lot of this pain of kind of lone wolf. I'm doing this on my own. Jesus Christ dying on the cross for everyone's sins. Some of those things cut that. And then so, in the first year, a lot of my needs were met though. I needed a place. I got a place. I needed a job. I got a job. I owed X and X amount of dollars on my license. Somehow I was able to pay that off. Looking back on it is kind of funny. I didn't even know how the fuck that happened, but I got that paid off. I was able to, get a vehicle. So I was able, in the first year, I was able to get some of my needs, majority of my deep needs met. The second year was polar opposite to that. The second year is where, okay, all these needs are met. All these now I want to up my station, and in succession, it's fucking God's will is not my own will. That was made very apparent. And that's a little bit of a different story. But in regards to the first year, the truth of the matter is I was pretty well in a daze for, I'd say, at least 9 months of that, because it was just too painful to be too present in that. For me to be present in the second year was okay, but for me to be present in the first year was fucking an absolute nightmare. The only faith I had was these people. The only faith I had was these rooms, was this big book, and then eventually I got to my own understanding. So, if it's painful, it's meant to be, But there's ways that you could cut that pain. And so I cut that pain with these people in early recovery. And then, today I was able to cut that pain with God. And that's really where you need to move to. But at first, making that leap is very difficult. And there's a world of misunderstanding around, God. I often say, if you want to hear some of the most fucking biggest nonsense you've ever heard in this room, go to a 3-topic discussion meeting, put God up on the wall and listen to what's being talked about. Because we're talking about like full-blown schizophrenia is what I'm hearing in these rooms, right? As opposed to actual and practical. Because I needed this thing to be practical. Like I'm getting drunk off of people's theories and opinions. And I just needed this to be practical. I needed a way to take, step 2 and put it into my life, or step 3, and practically put that and use that step in my life. And, I was able to eventually find that. And now I teach that. And, it's a good life, but fuck, I very rarely do I like thinking about the first year. Not to say there's much emotions connected with it anymore. You know, because I would think about it and just say, thank fuck, dude. If I had to do that again, because I do have a firm belief that if I am to drink and use again, I will not make it to these rooms. I will blow my brains out before I come back here. And I know that is fact. Just as much as I know I'm an alcoholic addict, gambling degenerate, and sex addict, is just as much as I know if I leave these rooms, I am not fucking coming back. And it's not, you know, I'm going to die some fucking rock star, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to die with a fucking pistol in my mouth. That's the reality. I know that, you know? So it's pretty well all I have to say on that. I mean, that's not, you know, I mean, as much as I gave you the problem, you know, I tried to give you a solution to the problem, because for me today, I spend probably about 10 to 20% of my time in the problem and about 80 to 90% of my time in the fucking solution. In fact, a lot of the times when I'm dealing with sponsees, I almost get irritable with the problem, because that's where they want to be. They want an hour conversation on the problem. And I would rather you just give me bullet points. You give me, you know what I mean? You keep the emotion out. You give me fucking bullet points. And then from there, we'll give you a solution to the problem, right? So that's all I have to say on that topic.
So, yeah, I think we're probably almost out of time, but I have more of a personal experience question to maybe cap this off with. I know you both have sponsored a lot of guys and have seen the ups and downs and what works and what hasn't. And I think just maybe even more from my own morbid curiosity, and maybe, you know, somebody hears this and they can connect to this answer, but I'm wondering if you guys can maybe try and paint a picture of the main thing that you see newcomers or newer guys in recovery. I mean, leading up into this first year, what is the main thing that you can see that you've spotted people doing wrong that leads to that first drink or drug?
That's fucking easy. It's fucking so easy, dude. You put the drink and the drug down, and I got a lot of other material that I've read that backs this up. And when I found this other material that backed it up, the fucking light bulbs went on. And it was in the sex conduct of the big book. You know, when sex is troublesome, we jump harder into helping others. It cures the imperious urge. When to yield would mean to heartache. And that's very short and simple. And Bill doesn't get into a lot of the sex conduct stuff. He doesn't want to be an arbiter there and blah, blah, blah. And he's very vague about that. But that line that I just quoted is very, very important, because from some of the other literature that I've studied. So when we come in here, we talked about earlier about the defective character that drives us, and we need this relief. And then we get the relief through the fucking substances, the drugs and the alcohol. Now you put the drugs and the alcohol down and you don't have a fucking relief. So now you start getting drunk on these defects of character. The number one way that I've seen that the disease wants out is through sex relation. And when I found this other literature, it said the sex madman is not essentially different than the dope madman. He is willing to risk reputation, life, and limb for this excursion of sex. And when I look at the history of my own life and the history of lives of my sponsees, guys will risk reputation and life and limb to indulge in this desire. It's very fucking powerful. And the book goes on to talk about it's the most powerful desire energy of all human beings. And when released in a purely physical form through the act of sex, it will diminish willpower and willingness within the individual. And not from a mental, psychological point of view, not from the egoic, my mind tells me I'm still targeting sobriety. But once you perform the act of sex, you release willingness and willpower within the physiology of your body. It's deeper than you fucking can understand. And so the target of being sober, let's say it's a bullseye, and the bullseye has all these rings. In the middle of the ring is the bullseye, and that's staying sober. When you first get here, that's what you want. And you're willing to do anything. But then because the disease starts fucking working its way through the cracks, the first crack is sex relation. And then now I'm 3 months, 4 months sober, and I want a piece of tail. And so these guys really focus in on the tail. And nobody in the rooms ever talks about you shouldn't fucking have a piece of tail. But when you've sponsored as many guys as us, you see that it's the number one fucking thing that actually takes somebody out. So then they get the piece of tail, and the target, the bullseye, the red part in the middle of staying sober now becomes very foggy, very fuzzy. But if you ask them, oh yeah, that's still my target. But they don't have a choice in it because they've fucking relinquished the control of the target of the bullseye to the physiology of releasing the energy. And now the willingness and willpower is very skewed and foggy. And it fucking actually subconsciously takes them off course. And now they're living in self again. And eventually they fucking pick up a drink. That to me is the number one reason that I see people relapse. It's probably the number one reason of all the male deaths that I see in the program, whether they be suicide or fucking drug overdoses. I would say it's primarily because of that also. And then, I'll let Jesse talk on it too, because I know he's got some takes. We've had many discussions about this. And when I work with guys, and I have guys specifically come to me for this, but are they really willing? Because it's such a powerful desire. A lot of guys eventually, after 2 or 3 months, they see how serious I am. They actually bail on it. And then they go and get in these relationships. And many of the men I've worked with are now dead. And I believe that was kind of the root of it, right? Selfish self-centeredness that we think we must be rid of. We must, or it kills us. It fucking kills us, dude. Men and women. This isn't just fucking... Women have a fucking really bad angle in this too, sex relation, but it's rooted more in the desires for like security and shit. So I'll let Jesse talk about more on the full physical aspect of what this release is.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. And it's not even much of a competition like it is sex. Baited in self, right? So like you could see it in many different areas in self. So I'm going to kind of explain that. So sex by far, like the sex relation out of 100, it would be like an 80% chance. 75 to 80% chance that this is going to take this guy out. Then you're looking at career and finance being maybe a 35 to 45% chance. So it's not even really, you can't even really compare it. But the trick is though, is that when you go to a room and you see a guy, you don't necessarily see him being rampant in the sex relations. Unless he's trying to chat with a whole bunch of women, or unless he's trying to joke around with women in the meeting, which you do see, but not very often. So the guy could be fully rampant in sex and it's not apparent unless he has to bring it up to you, ask you for help, or you are to visually see it, which isn't always the case. So in regards to that, because these men have absolutely no character, they have no substance to a character, a lot of the ways they're gonna get along is through societal things. So this is where the black on black BMW comes in. A BMW is more like societal, right? So like if you are to make it in the world, what kind of watch would you buy? Rolex. So that is societal. So for example, in India, it's not Rolex, it's a Rado. Right? That's per their society, per Western culture. You are to make it in this world, you are to buy a Rolex as a watch. Well, the same thing goes for a BMW and many other things. So a lot of the times when I see a guy and he's fully rampant in societal things, you have no money, like you just got your welfare check. You just burnt it on a brand new pair of fucking J's. You are asking me for a smoke, but you have a brand new pair of J's. Boom. There it is right there. Whether you're rampant in sex or not, I know that is a telltale sign for me that you are operating fully in self. And then so does the black on black BMW come in. It's the same premise. We both know you have absolutely no money. This is why you bought this $3,000 beater, but you're acting like you fucking run the show, right? It is the attitude. It is the purchases that he's making. It is the way that he's going about life. The odds are once a guy's full blown in that area, like he's doing absolutely all of the things that I've mentioned, there's a very good chance that pride has already reasserted itself. You can't tell him anything that is gonna that is going to actually stick with him. And he's already on his way to drink. He may have another couple months, maybe in another couple years, but it's going to be a slow bleed out to the drink. When it comes to, sex and the sex relations is, if I look at, if I am off my being, why do I do the things that I do, right? If I'm not paying attention to myself, if I'm not working on humility, if I'm not getting rid of all the society things that, society tells me this, I'll be a better man, that type of shit. When I drop all that and I could grow into who I am, the purchases that I make and the actions that I make are essentially based on me and how I could be, better use to others. But there is a self-learning component to it. If all that's gone, all the things I'm doing is for the opposite sex. That has to do with the car that I drive, the way that I talk, how I act around same sex, opposite sex, what I wear, what kind of watch I have, all of it, everything, every fucking thing is based around the opposite sex. So if that be the case, why is it not the most powerful urge when just about every action I make is for the opposite sex? Right? So if I'm also I look at it from that point of view. I also look at it from, if I have dropped the drink, which if you look at like maybe a spectrum from black to white, let's say, the drink is black and let's say God is white, there's a lot of gray area in there. And for me to get with a woman and get, instant gratification, for me to feel feelings that is very difficult on my own to produce, then that's a lot easier than it is the work to get to God. Because to get to God is not instant, not at all. I mean, it takes some serious work. You have to clear a channel. You have to believe. There's some decisions you have to make and uphold. There's a lot of action involved, right? That it is just easier, right? But it's actually not like, it's easier for sure. That's more surface. It's more comfortable. It's more comfortable for me to just seek release out of the material world. And in this circumstance, we're talking about women. So there's a number of different components that even when I do get to the white, the action to uphold the white as opposed to the gray is two totally different things. One takes action, one takes fucking just about no action.
So I just want to add one more thing, because I didn't actually clarify everything with that sexual energy, although it's the most important energy. And when released in that physical form, it depletes the willingness and willpower of the human being. But the key feature of this, when this energy is harnessed, when it's actually transmuted, it's called sexual transmutation of energy. And you take this energy and you fucking reuse that energy in something that's purposeful and meaningful and creative. It actually enhances whatever it is, and it brings creativity that is not really of man. It brings a creative nature and an ability to like soar above what your natural abilities would be, which is why many sports teams don't let their players have sex before big playoff runs and things like this. And you'll see a lot of really creative people in the world. They try not to indulge in sex conduct because they're in a creative mode. And it's been proven in the physiology sense of the human being that actually enhances pure creativity. So if you can take this and use it towards your recovery, it will enhance your recovery in ways that you can't really understand, and it takes you to a new level. But it's not like doesn't make sense to the mind, because it's not a logical thing. It's more of like a spiritual, energetic thing that doesn't make sense to the human mind. So I wanted to add that too.
So just quickly, I want to reaffirm that, because when it talks about when sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into working with others, right? We meet their needs, right? And so why we do that is because we are trying to transmute that energy. We are trying to take that very powerful self-will energy and trying to transmute that into helping others and hoping to put that energy there and actually lock it down. Not just displacing it or deflecting it, to lock it down, right? So this is, I mean, why I got into sponsoring so many guys was that specifically. Was that reason specifically as to why I've sponsored the amount of men that I've sponsored. Was trying to transmute that.
Yeah, well, thank you very, very much for your input, It was very, very nice to have you on here, Jesse. Thank you for giving me the time on here as well, Bill. You guys put some really good facts into audio, and I hope this connects with somebody that may need it most.
Right on, Jess. Thanks for coming out, buddy. Until next time, next week or the week after, have some fun, but not too much.
Yeah, that's my fucking one.
What the fuck are we talking about?
Thank you for tuning in to the UDR Cast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at billward.life to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.